Good, excuse me. Good late afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is your host, Christopher Mark Curtis Bowen, on another edition of Fire of Liberty. Once again, this title really kind of brings it down to a type of science. And, going to be reading, I guess, more about the science of government. Very, very good. It provides lots of discernment, clarity, and intelligence, ultimately. And, well, let me just read it. The great, I believe it's a few pages. The great Manu says to the Rishis. The great Manu says to the Rishis, after discoursing on the duties of the four classes and the four orders, we shall now describe Raja, Dharma, or the duties and qualifications, etc., of rulers. In other words, we shall discuss as to who is fit to be a king, how he is to be elected, and how he can attain the highest bliss, salvation. Let a Kshatriya, whose knowledge, culture, and piety are as perfect as those of a Brahmin, govern the country with perfect justice in the following way. Open parentheses, God teaches, close parentheses. Let there be, for the benefit of the rulers and the ruled, 3 assemblies, religious, legislative, educational. Let each discuss and decide subjects that concern it and adorn all men with knowledge, culture, righteousness, independence, and wealth, and thereby make them happy. End quote. Quote, let the 3 assemblies, military councils, and army harmoniously work together to carry on the government of a country, close quote, open quote. A king should address the assembly thus, let the leader of the assembly abide by the just laws passed by the assembly and let other members do the same, close quote. That means that no single individual should be invested with absolute power. The king, who is the president of the assembly, and the assembly itself should be interdependent on each other. Both should be controlled by the people, who in turn should be governed by the assembly. If this system be not followed, and the king be independent of the people and have absolute power, quote, he would impoverish the people, being despotic and hence arrogant, and oppress them, even eat them up, just as a tiger or any other carnivorous animal pounces upon a robust animal and eats it up. A despotic ruler does not let anyone else grow in power, robs the rich, usurps their property by unjust punishment, and accomplishes his selfish end. One man should therefore never be given despotic power. End quote. Quote, O men, exclamation point, let that man alone among you be made a king, the president of the assembly, who is a very powerful conqueror of foes, is never beaten by them, has the capacity to become the paramount sovereign, is most enlightened, is worthy of being made a president, who possesses most noble qualities, accomplishments, character, and disposition, who is thoroughly worthy of the homage, trust, and respect of all. End quote. Quote, O ye learned men, exclamation point, proclaim that man with one voice your king, the president and head of the state, who is just, impartial, well-educated, cultured, and friend of all. In this way alone shall ye attain universal sovereignty, be greater than all, manage the affairs of the state, obtain political eminence, acquire wealth, and rid the world of its enemies. End quote. God teaches in the Veda, quote, rulers, exclamation point, your implements of I don't want to speak about the W word, so I'm going to skip over that part. And go to the last end part of the quote, which says, or go to the next part of this paragraph. In other words, it is only okay, I'm going to read this part. In other words, it is only as long as men remain honorable, just, and virtuous that they are politically great. When they become wicked and unjust, they are absolutely ruined. Let a nation therefore elect the most learned men as members of the educational assembly, the most devout men as members of religious assembly, and men of the most praiseworthy character as members of the legislative assembly, and let that great man in it, who possesses most excellent qualities, is highly accomplished, and bears most honorable character, be made the head or president of the political assembly. Let the three assemblies harmoniously work together and make good laws, and let all abide by those laws. Let them all be of one mind in affairs that promote the happiness of all. All men should subordinate themselves to the laws that are calculated to promote general well-being. They should be free in matters relating to individual well-being. Qualifications of the head of the state. Quote, he should be as powerful as electricity, as dear to his people's hearts as their very breath, able to read the innermost thoughts of others, and just in his dealings as a judge. He should enlighten people's minds by the spread of knowledge, justice, and righteousness, and dispel ignorance and injustice as the sun illuminates the world. He should be like one who consumes wickedness like fire, keeps the wicked and the criminal under control like a jailer, gladdens the hearts of the good men like the moon, makes the country rich and prosperous, as a treasurer keeps his treasury full, is powerful and majestic like the sun, keeps the people in fear and awe, and on whom no one in the whole world dares to look with a stern eye. He alone is then fit to be the head of the state, who is like fire, air, the sun, the moon, a judge, a treasurer, a gaoler, and keeping the wicked under the control, and like electricity in power. The true king, quote, the law alone is the real king, the dispenser of justice, the disciplinarian. The law is considered as the surety for the four classes and orders to discharge properly their respective duties. The law alone is the true governor that maintains order among the people. The law alone is their protector. The law keeps awake whilst all the people are fast asleep. The wise therefore look upon the law alone as dharma or right. When rightly administered, the law makes all men happy, but when administered wrongly, without due regard for the requirements of justice, it ruins the king. All the four classes would become corrupt, all order would come to an end. I'm going to continue on from this point. Where the law, which is likened unto a fear-inspiring man, black in color with red eyes, striking fear into the hearts of the people and preventing them from committing crimes, rules supreme, there the people never go astray, and consequently live in happiness if it be administered by a just and learned man. He alone is considered a fit person to administer the law by the wise, who invariably speaks the truth, is thoughtful, highly intellectual, and very clever in the attainment of virtue, wealth, and righteous desires. The law rightly administered by the king greatly promotes the practice of virtue, acquisition of wealth, and secures the attainment of the heartfelt desires of his people. But the same law destroys the king who is sensual, indolent, crafty, malevolent, mean, and low-minded. Great is the power and majesty of the law. It cannot be administered by a man who is ignorant and unjust. It surely brings the downfall of the king who deviates from the path of rectitude. The law can never be justly administered by a man who is destitute of learning and culture, has no wise and good men to assist him, and is sunk in sensualism. He alone is fit to administer the law, which is another name for justice, who is wise, pure in heart, of truthful character, associates with the good, conducts himself according to the law, and is assisted by the truly good and great men in the discharge of his duties. End quote. Chief offices, quote, the four chief offices, commander-in-chief of the forces, head of the civil government, minister of justice, and the supreme head of all, the king, should be held only by those persons who are well versed in all the four Vedas and the Shastras, are conversant with all the sciences and philosophies, devout, and have perfect control over their desires, passions, and possess a noble character. Let no man transgress that law which has been passed by an assembly of 10 men learned and wise, or at the very least of 3 such men. This assembly must consist of members who are well versed in the four Vedas, keen logicians, masters of language, and men conversant with the science of religion. They must belong to the first 3 orders, Brahmacharya, Grihastha, and Vanaprastha. Let no man transgress what has been decided by even an assembly of 3 men, who are scholars of the Rig Veda, the Yajur Veda, and the Sama Veda, respectively. Even the decision of one sannyasi, who is fully conversed with all the 4 Vedas and is superior to all the twice-born Dvijas, should be considered of the highest authority. But let no man abide by the decision of myriads of ignorant men. Even a meeting of thousands of men cannot be designated an assembly if they be destitute of such high virtues as self-control or truthful character, be ignorant of the Vedas, and be men of no understanding like the Shudras. Let no man abide by the law laid down by men who are altogether ignorant and destitute of knowledge of the Veda, for whoever obeys the law propounded by ignorant fools falls into hundreds of kinds of sin and vice. End quote. Therefore let not ignorant fools be made members of the aforesaid 3 assemblies, political, educational, and religious. On the other hand, let learned and devout persons only be elected to such high offices. Qualifications of members of the political assembly. Quote, those men alone are fit to fill such high offices as of the president or a member of the political assembly, who have learnt the 3 kinds of knowledge of good deeds and their practice, of elevation of mind by meditation and contemplation of abstruse subjects, and of that superior wisdom that results from the first 2, from the scholars of the 4 Vedas, the true system of government, the science of logic, the divine science which consists of the knowledge of the nature, character, and attributes of God, and the arts of elocution and debate. Let all members and leaders always walk in the path of rectitude, keep the senses under perfect control, and keep aloof from sin. Let them always practice yoga and meditate on God morning and evening, for he who cannot control his mind and senses, which are subject of the soul, can never keep the people under control. Let a man therefore most diligently shun open parentheses, and help others to do the same, close parentheses. 18 vices. Vices from which a man once entangled into them can hardly escape. 10 of which proceed from love of pleasure, and 8 from anger. A king addicted to vices arising from the love of pleasure loses his kingdom, wealth and power, and even his character, whilst one who is addicted to vices arising from anger may even lose his life. The 10 vices proceeding from love of pleasure are hunting, gaming, playing with dice and gambling, etc., sleeping by day, gossiping or talking of sensual subjects, excess with women, use of intoxicants such as alcohol, opium, cannabis, indica, and its products, etc., excessive indulgence in singing, playing, and dancing, or hearing and seeing other people do so, and 8, and useless wandering about from place to place. The vices that proceed from anger are tale-bearing, violence, such as outraging another man's wife, malevolence, envy, mortification excited by the sight of another person's superiority or success, detraction from one's character, expenditure of money for sinful purposes, saying unkind or hard words, infliction of punishment without any offense. Let him assiduously shun self-love, that all wise men hold to be the root of all evils that are born of the love of pleasure and anger. It is through the love of self that a man contracts all these vices. The use of the most pernicious vices that arise from love of pleasure, infliction of punishment without offense, the use of slanderous language, the expenditure of money for unrighteous purposes. These three are the great vices born of anger that bring extreme suffering on the possessor thereof. Out of these seven proceeding from the love of pleasure and anger, the one preceding is worse than the one following. In other words, the use of slanderous language is worse than abuse of money, punishing the innocent worse than the use of slanderous language. Hunting is worse than punishing the innocent. Excess with women worse than hunting, and the use of intoxicants worse still. It is certain that it is better to die than to be addicted to vices, since the longer a wicked man lives, the more sins he will commit, and consequently lower and lower he will sink, and thereby the more he will suffer, whilst he who is free from vices enjoys happiness, even if he dies." End quote. Therefore, it behooves all men, especially the king, to keep aloof from hunting, drinking, and other vices, and instead to develop a good character and a noble disposition, and to devote themselves to the practice of virtuous deeds. The qualifications of ministers and members of assemblies. Quote, "Let a king appoint 7 or 8 good, righteous, and clever ministers who are natives of the country, are thoroughly conversant with the Vedas and the Shastras, are very brave and courageous, whose judgment seldom errs, who come from good families and are well-tried men. Even an act easy in itself becomes difficult to be accomplished by a man when single-handed. How much more so then is the great work of the government of a country by a man single-handed. It is therefore a most dangerous thing to make one man a despotic ruler, or to entrust a single man with the sole management of the affairs of the state. Let the head of a state then constantly consult with his clever and learned ministers of the affairs of the state, such as peace, not going to say the W word, and defense, quietly protecting his own country and waiting for an opportunity. Proper management of the internal affairs of the state, 5, and exchequer and the army, 6, pacification of the newly conquered countries by freeing them from all kinds of disturbance. Let him daily reflect on the 6 subjects. Having ascertained the individual opinion of each of his ministers and other members of the assembly, let him abide by the decision of the majority and do what is beneficial for him as well as for others. Let him likewise appoint other ministers of men who are of great integrity, highly intellectual, of resolute minds, of great organizing power, and of vast experience. Let him appoint good, energetic, strong, and clever officers, as many as he requires for the due transaction of the business of the state. Under them let brave, courageous, strong men of great integrity and of noble lineage fill positions involving great responsibility and risk, while let timid and faint-hearted men be employed for the administration of internal affairs. Let him also appoint an ambassador who comes from a good family, is very clever, perfectly honest, able to read the innermost thoughts of others, and to foretell future developments and events by observing the expression of faces and other significant signs and acts, and is well versed in all the Shastras, branches of knowledge. He alone is a fit person to be appointed an ambassador, who is very much devoted to politics, loves his country with all his heart, is of irreproachable character, pure in hearts, highly intelligent, and endowed with an excellent memory, who can adapt himself to the manners and customs of different countries and different times, is good-looking, fearless, and a master of elocution. And a master of elocution. End quote. Duties of ministers and other high officials. Quote, the power to enforce the law should be vested in a minister who should see that the law is administered justly. Comma, treasury and other affairs of the state should be under the control of the king, peace under that of the ambassador, and everything under the control of the assembly. It is the ambassador alone who can make peace between enemies. It is the ambassador alone who can make peace between friends as well. He should so strive as to Okay. Thus, having learned the designs of his enemy, let a king, the president of the assembly, as well as members of the assembly, ambassadors, and others, endeavor to guard himself against all danger from him. In a thickly wooded country where the soil is rich, let him build himself a town surrounded by a fortress of earth, or one protected by water, or one surrounded by a thick wood on all sides, or fortress of armed men, or one surrounded by a mountain. Let him build a wall around the city, because one brave, well-armed soldier placed inside it is a match for 100, and 100 for thousands. It is therefore extremely necessary to build a fort. Let the fort be well supplied with arms and ammunition, well supplied with various kinds of fruit and various kinds of grains and other foodstuffs, with conveyances and beasts of burden, etc., with teachers and preachers, artisans, various kinds of machines, with grass and grain for animals, and with water, etc. In the center of the town let him build for himself a government house, well protected from wind, suited to all weathers, with well-provided parks and gardens around it, and well supplied with water. It should be big for all the state functions. Having done so far, that is, having completed his studies in the order of Brahmacharya and settled the affairs of the state, let him choose a consort of Kshatriya class, born of a high family, endowed with beauty and other excellent qualities, dearest to his heart, blessed with charming manners, and equal to him in knowledge, acquisitions, accomplishments, and of like temperament. Let him take one wife, and one only, and consider all other women as unapproachable. Therefore let him not even look at another woman, open parentheses, with the eye of lust, close parentheses. Let him retain a chaplain and a spiritual teacher to perform homa and yajnas suitable for different seasons and other religious duties for him in the palace, and let him always devote himself to the business of the state. To devote himself day and night to the affairs of the state without allowing anything to go out of order is the highest duty of a king. This is his worship, this is his communion. End quote. Revenue, let the king collect his revenue through honorable, trustworthy, and accomplished men possessed of excellent character. Let him, who is the president of the assembly, his ministers and other officials, and the assembly observe the eternal principles taught by the Vedas, and let them act like fathers to the people. Let the assembly appoint officials of various kinds whose sole duty it should be to see that the state officials in all departments do their duties faithfully according to the regulations. Let them who discharge their duties satisfactorily be honored, while those who do not be punished properly. In order to disseminate the knowledge of the Veda, which is truly called the imperishable treasure of the kings, let the king and the assembly show due respect to students who return from their seminaries after having studied the Veda and Shastras in the order of Brahmacharya, as well as their teachers. This helps forward the spread of education and progress of a country. If a king devoted to the welfare of his people be defied by This is for purposes. I'm gonna interject right here. This is for purpose of wisdom, and for knowledge, and it's just for enlightenment. Obviously, this is for peace, reasons of peace, pure peace, sustainability and stability, and constant peace. I will say this part just for understanding, and the learned and those who are common listeners and very intelligent know exactly the context. Hopefully know the context that I'm describing when I... Okay, so let's read this. If a king devoted to the welfare of his people be defied by an enemy of equal, greater, or less strength, let him remember the duty of a Cassastria and never shrink from going to battle. Let him fight with such skill as may ensure his victory. Those kings who, with the object of defeating their enemies, fight fearlessly to their utmost and never turn away from the field of battle shall obtain happiness. They must never turn their backs upon the field of battle, but it is sometimes necessary to hide away from the enemy in order to obtain victory over him. Let them employ all kinds of tactics to ensure their success in battle, but let them not perish foolishly like a tiger who, when his temper is roused, exposes himself foolishly to the fire and is thereby killed. In the field of battle, let soldiers bear in mind the duty of men of honor, and therefore never strike a man who is standing near the field of battle, a non-combatant, nor one who is a eonoch, nor one who with folded palms begs for peace, nor one whose hair is disheveled or scattered over his eyes, nor one who is sitting at ease, nor one who says, I am at your mercy, nor one who is asleep, nor one who is unconscious or in a fit, nor one who is disarmed, nor one who is naked, nor one who is a mere spectator, nor one who is only a camp follower, nor one who is in agony of pain from his wounds, nor one who is an invalid, nor one who is seriously wounded, nor one who is terrified, nor one who is running away, open parentheses, from the field of battle, close parentheses. They should make them prisoners and provide them with food, drink, and other necessaries of life. The wounded should be medically attended to. They should never be teased or made to suffer in any way. They should be employed in the kind of work that suits their station, etc. The king should especially see that no one strikes a woman, a child, an old man, a wounded man, and one who is diseased or afflicted with sorrow. Let him protect and bring up their children as if they were his own, and let their women also be also well looked after. He should look upon them as he would look upon his own daughters or sisters, nor should he ever look upon them with the eye of lust. After the country has settled down, let him send all those from whom he does not fear a fresh revolt away to their homes, but let them keep in prison all others who he fears may possibly raise the standard of revolt. The soldier who cowardly turns his back on a field of battle and is slain by the open parentheses by the enemy, close parentheses, is thus rightly punished for his disloyalty to his master, or shall take unto himself all the honor due to the deceased on account of his past good conduct, which begets happiness in this world and in the next. The soldier who is killed whilst running away from the field of battle shall never obtain happiness. All his good work is nullified by this act of cowardice. He alone wins laurels who fights faithfully. Let the king never violate this law, that carriages, horses, elephants, tents, umbrellas, grain, silver and gold, cattle such as cows, women, cases of butter, various other articles, are lawful prize of the soldier or of the officer who takes them in word. The captors should give the 16th part of their loot to the king, and so should the latter distribute among the whole army of the 16th part of what was taken by them collectively, end quote. Let his wife and children have the share of the man who is killed in word. The wife and children of that man should be well looked after till the children are grown up, when the king should offer them suitable state appointments. Let no one who is desirous of augmenting the prosperity of his state or of gaining fame, victory, and happiness transgress this law. Quote, when the king and the assembly, quote, what the king and the assembly have not, let them strive hard to get, what they have acquired, let them preserve with care, what they have preserved, let them augment, and let them spend the augmented wealth in the diffusion of the knowledge of the Vedas, the spread of the principles of true religion, and helping scholars and preachers of the Vedic religion, and bringing up orphans. Having learnt the fourfold object of activity, let him shun sloth and live an active life. Let him obtain what he has not got by the observance of the law, and what he has acquired, let him protect with diligent attention. What he has protected, let him augment by investing profitably, and let him always spend his augmented wealth in the furtherance of the aforesaid cause. Let him on all occasions act without guile and never without sincerity, but keeping himself well on his guard, let him discover and ward off the evil designs of his enemy. Let him ponder over the acquisition of wealth like a heron that pretends to be as if in a meditative attitude just before catching fish. Having obtained the necessary material and augmented his power, let him put forth his strength like a lion to vanquish his foe. Like a tiger, let him stealthily creep towards his enemy and catch him. When a powerful enemy has come close by, let him run away from him like a hare and then overtake him by stratagem. Let not his foe discover his weak points, but the vulnerable points of his foe let him himself well discern. Let him hide his vulnerable points from his enemy, just as a tortoise draws in his limbs and keeps them concealed from view. Lo, such a victorious sovereign deduce all dacoits, roberts, and the like to submission by conciliating them, by giving them presents, or by turning them against each other. If he fails to restrain them by those means, let him do so by inflicting heavy punishment on them. As a farmer separates the husk from the corn without injuring the latter, so should a king exterminate dacoits and burglars, and thus protect his people. The king who, through neglect of duty and lack of understanding, oppresses his people soon loses his kingdom and perishes with his family before his time. Just as living beings lose their lives through the failure of their bodily strength, so do kings as well as their families lose their power and even their lives by oppressing their subjects. Therefore, in order to conduct the government properly, let the king and the assembly so strive as to fully accomplish this object. The king who is always devoted to the welfare of his people obtains perpetual happiness. Let him therefore have an administrative office in the midst of 2, 3, 5, and 100 villages, wherein he should keep the required number of officials to carry on government business. Let him appoint an official at the head of one village, a second one over 10 such villages, a third one over 20, a fourth one over 100 villages, and a fifth one over 1,000 such villages, over 1,000 such villages. Let the Lord, open parentheses, the administrator, close parentheses, of one town daily appraise the Lord of 10 towns privately of all crimes committed within his jurisdiction, and the Lord of 10 submit his report to the Lord of 20. Let the Lord of 20 notify all such matters to the Lord of 100 every day, and the Lord of 100 to the Lord of 1,000. In other words, 5 lords of 20, a lord of 100, 10 lords of 100, and 10 lords of 10,000, and the Lord of 10,000 to assembly which governs the affairs of 100,000 townships, and all such assemblies to the Supreme International Assembly representing the whole world. Over every 10,000 villages let him appoint 2 presiding officials, one of whom should preside over the assembly, while the other should tour all over the country and diligently inspect the work and conduct of all the magistrates and other officials. For the purpose of holding the meetings of town councils, let him erect a town hall in every big town. It should be lofty, capacious, and beautiful like the moon, wherein let the members of the town council, who should be men of vast learning and experience, deliberate over the affairs of their town and make such laws as will promote the welfare of the people and advance the cause of education and enlightenment. Let the inspecting governor have detectives under him who should come from the Castria as well as other classes, and through them let him secretly know perfectly the conduct, good or bad, of the government servant as well as that of the people. Let him punish those who do not faithfully discharge their duties, and honor those whose conduct is praiseworthy. Let the king appoint such men guardians of his people as are virtuous, well experienced, learned, and of good lineage. Under such learned officials, let him also place men who are very wicked as burglars and robbers, who live by seizing what belongs to others. It will help to keep those men from pursuit of their wicked ways, as well as to protect the people properly. Let the king punish properly the magistrate who accepts bribes from either the plaintiff or the defendant in a case, and therefore gives an unjust decision, confiscate all his possessions, and banish him to a place from which he can never return. Were that man to go unpunished, it would encourage other officials to commit similar wicked crimes, whilst the infliction of punishment would serve to check them. But let those officials be paid handsomely for their services, either by gifts of land or in lump sums of money paid annually or monthly, enough to keep them in comfort and even to make them rich. Let an old official, in consideration of his services, be granted a pension equal to half his pay. This pension must last only so long as he lives, not after. But let his children be properly honored or given government appointments according to their qualifications. Let his wife and children be given an allowance by the state, enough for their subsistence, which should be stopped if they turned wicked. Let the king constantly follow this policy. End quote. Let the king in conjunction with the assembly, after full consideration, so levy taxes in his dominions as to ensure the happiness of both the rulers and ruled. Let the king draw an annual revenue from his people little by little, just as the leech, the suckling calf, and the bee take their food little by little. Let him not through extreme covetousness destroy the very roots of his own and others' happiness, since he who cuts off the roots of happiness and temporal prosperity brings nothing but misery on himself as well as on others. The king who can be both gentle and stern on occasion demands, is highly honored if he be gentle to the good and stern towards the wicked. Having thus arranged the affairs of the state, let him devote himself to the protection and welfare of his people. With diligent attention, know that the king, as well as his ministers, to be dead, not alive, the lives and property of those subjects who are violently taken away by ruffians, whilst they lament and cry aloud for help. Great shall be his suffering. To promote the happiness of their subjects, therefore, is the highest duty of the kings. The king who discharges his duty faithfully, levies taxes, and governs the country with the help of the assembly, enjoys happiness, but he who does otherwise is afflicted with misery and suffering. End quote. Let the king rise in the last watch of the night, have a wash, meditate on God with his whole attention, perform homa, pay his respects to the devoutly learned men, take his meal, and enter the audience chamber. Let him standing there show respect to the people present. Having dismissed them, let him take counsel with his prime minister on state affairs. Thereafter let him go out for a walk or a ride, seek the top of a mountain wilderness where there is not even the tiniest tree, open parentheses, to hide a person, close parentheses, or a sequestered house, and discuss, open parentheses, state affairs, close parentheses, with him in all sincerity. Quote, that king whose profound thoughts other men, even though combined, cannot unravel, in other words, whose thought are deep, pure, centered in public good, and hidden, shall rule the whole earth, even though poor. Let him never do even a single thing without the approval of the assembly. End quote. Quote, the king and the other persons in authority should keep it in view that it is their duty to adopt after due deliberation one of the following 6 measures as occasion demands. Of course, this is with peace in mind, so I'm going to read most of it. 1. Remaining passive. 2. Marching to action. 3. Making peace. 5. Gaining victory for dividing his forces. 6. Actually, I'll save them all, but of course this requires discernment. 1. Remaining passive. 2. Marching to action. 3. Making peace with the enemy. 4. Declaring war against wicked enemies. 5. Gaining victory by dividing his forces. 6. Seeking the protection of or alliance with a powerful king when a ruler is weak. Let the king thoroughly acquaint himself with the twofold nature of these measures, the 2 kinds of peace with the enemy are: the contracting parties act in conjunction, and they act apart. But let the king always go on doing whatever is necessary for the present or will be required for the future. W word is of 2 kinds: when it is waged on account of an injury to himself, and when it is waged on account of an injury to a friendly power or an ally in season or out of season. Remaining quiet is of 2 kinds. One second. Remaining quiet is of 2 kinds. Firstly, when it is done when the king's own power is weakened through some cause, and secondly, when he remains quiet on the advice of his ally. To divide one's force, rank, and file into 2 sections in order to gain victory is called the division of the force, seeking the protection of or alliance with a powerful ruler, or the advice of a man in self-defense when threatened by an enemy, or when on the offensive, is the twofold protection on alliance. I think that says on. Or protection of alliance. When a king ascertains that by going to W I'm going to read this next paragraph. Right, when he finds his people and the army considerable happy, prosperous and full of spirits, and himself the same, let him then, next paragraph, when he knows his own troops to be contented, cheerful, and fit, well fed, well nourished, and well clothed, and this is important, enlightenment. So I'm going to read this, but of course this is for discernment, enlightenment, wisdom, and of course peace of mind and peace on earth, and of course in general with the Star Nations, lack of federation, planets. So rewarding. And Andromeda Council, and many peaceful organizations. When he finds his people and the army considerable, happy, prosperous and full of spirits, and himself the same, let him then declare war against his foe. When he knows his own troops to be contented, cheerful, and fit, well-fed, well-nourished, and well-clothed, and those of his enemy the reverse, let him then attack or march against his foe. When he finds his foe much stronger than himself, let him accomplish his object by doubling or dividing his forces. When it becomes clear to him that his enemies will soon march against him, let him then seek speedily the protection of or alliance with a just and powerful king. Let a king serve him who would help him in restoring order among his people, or in keeping his army under control, or his enemy in check, as he would his teacher, temporal and spiritual. But if he finds his protector and ally full of evil designs, let him fight him too fearlessly. Let him never be hostile to a king who is just and virtuous. On the other hand, let him always be on friendly terms with him. All the aforesaid measures are to be adopted in order to vanquish a wicked man who is in power, end quote. Quote, a king who is a true statesman adopts such measures that neither his allies, neutral powers, nor his foes may grow in power or gain any great advantage over him. Let him thoroughly deliberate over the advantages and disadvantages of his past actions, his present and future duties. Then let him strive to ward off evils and promote good results. That king shall never be vanquished by his enemies who can foresee the good and evil results likely to follow from the measures that he would adopt in the future, who acts according to his convictions in the present without delay, and knows his failings in the past. Let a statesman, especially the king, the president of the assembly, so endeavor that the power of his allies, neutral powers, and foes may be kept within limits and not otherwise, nor should he be negligent of this. This alone is, in brief, true statesmanship. Quote, end quote. Quote, before a king begins his march against his enemy, let him secure the safety of his dominions, provide himself with all that is necessary for the expedition, take the necessary number of troops, carriages, and other conveyances. The longer W word and the F word, etc. Blah, blah, blah. And dispatch his spies in all quarters, having seen that all the three ways, by land, on water, and through air, are clear and well secured. Let him travel on land by means of cars, on foot, on horseback, or on elephants, on water by boats, through air by airships, and the like. Well provide himself with infantry, cavalry, elephants, cars, provisions, and other necessary things, and proceed gradually towards the chief city of the enemy, having first given out some reason for his march. In his conversation, let him be well on his guard against and keep a strict watch on the movements of a man who is inwardly a friend of the enemy and privately gives him information, whilst outwardly keeps with him also on friendly terms, because he who is inwardly an enemy and outwardly a friend must be looked upon as the most dangerous foe. Let the king see that all officers learn the science and art of war. Let the king see that all officers learn the science and art of, as well as he himself and other people. It is only those warriors who are well experienced in the art of that can fight well on the field of battle. Let them be well drilled in the following various dispositions: marching troops in file, marching troops in column, marching troops in square, marching troops at the double, marching troops in echelon, advancing in skirmish order. Let him extend his troops to the flank from which he apprehends danger like a lotus flower. Let him keep his troops with their commanders on four sides and himself in the center. Let him place his generals and commanding officers with their brave troops in all the 8 directions. Let him turn his front towards the fighting. He must also have his flanks and rear well guarded, otherwise the enemy may attack him on these positions. On all sides let him station those soldiers who are well trained in the art of W, firm in their places like their pillars of a roof, virtuous, clever in charging and sustaining a charge, fearless and faithful. When he has to fight an enemy superior to himself in numbers, let him then arrange his troops in close formation or quickly deploy as occasion demands. When he has to fight his way into a city, a fort, or the ranks of his enemy, let him arrange his troops in various forms of military array, such as marching them in echelon or in the form of a double-edged sword that cuts both ways. Let them fight as well as advance. Before artillery or musketry I'll finish the sentence. Before artillery or musketry fire, let him order his troops to crawl like snakes till they get near the guns, or shoot or capture the gunners, and turn those very guns on the enemy or shoot him with his rifles. Or let him make old soldiers run on horses before the guns, keep the soldiers in the middle and thus attack the enemy. Let him shoot the enemies, scatter his forces, or capture them by a vigorous assault. On level ground let him fight on foot, on horseback, or in cars, on sea, in men of W, in shallow waters on elephants, among trees and bushes with arrows, and in sandy places with swords and shields. When his troops are engaged in fighting, let him cheer and encourage them at the close of a battle. Let him gladden the hearts of those who have distinguished themselves by making nice speeches, providing them with everything they need, looking after their comforts, and helping them in every other way. Let him never engage in a fight without forming his troops into the necessary array of battle. Let him always watch the behavior of his troops and see whether they discharge their duties faithfully or not. Let him, if occasion arises, surround the enemy and detain him, harass his country and cut off his supply of grass, water, food, and fuel. Let him destroy the reservoirs, city halls, and trenches of his enemy, alarm him by night, and adopt other measures to vanquish him. Having conquered his foe, let him have a treaty signed by him. Let him, if necessary, dispose him from the throne and appoint another righteous man from the same dynasty as king, and have a document signed by him to the effect that he would carry out his orders. In other words, that he would adopt a just system of government, serve his people, and protect them. Let him give him the aforesaid advice, and leave such men with him as would prevent any further disturbance. Let him honor his vanquished foe with the gifts of gems and other valuable presents. Let him not behave so meanly as to deprive him even of his subsistence. Even if he were to keep him as his prisoner, let him show him such respect as may free him from the sorrows consequent on his defeat, and make his life happy, semicolon, because the seizure of others' property in this world gives rise to hatred, whilst the bestowal of gifts on others is the cause of love. Let him especially do the right thing for him at the right moment. It is a laudable thing to give the vanquished foe what is his heart's desire. Let him never taunt him, nor laugh at him, nor poke fun at him, nor even remind him of his defeat. Instead, let him always show him respect by addressing him as his own brother, end quote. And this is already known, I've already reiterated this before, but qualifications of a friend. Quote, a king does not gain in power so much by the acquisition of gold and territory as by securing a friend who is firm, loving, and far-seeing. Such a friend is valuable no matter whether he is powerful enough to help him in the attainment of his wishes, or is even weak. It is laudable for a king to secure a friend, feeble though he may be, who knows what is right, remembers gratefully, and the kindness shown to him is cheerful in temper, affectionate, and preserving. Let him bear in mind that it is not proper to make a foe of a man who is eminently wise. He comes from an excellent family and is brave, courageous, clever-minded, liberal-minded, grateful, firm, and patient. Whoever makes such a man his foe is surely to suffer. He is called neutral. open parentheses, neither an avowed friend nor a declared foe, close parentheses, who is possessed of good qualities, knowledge of mankind, valor, kindness of heart, and who never discloses the secret of his heart. Let a king get up early in the morning, attend to his toilet, worship God, perform Homa himself, or have it done by his chaplain, consult with his ministers, inspect and review his troops, cheer their spirits, inspect stables of horses and elephants, cow houses, etc., stores of hospitals and stores of arms and ammunition, hospitals and the treasury. In short, inspect everything with his own eyes and point out shortcomings. Let him then go to the gymnasium, take physical exercise, and thereafter in the middle of the day enter his private quarters to dine with his wife. His food should be well tested and be such as will promote health, strength, energy, and intellect. It should consist of various kinds of edibles, drinks, and sweets, juicy and fragrant dishes, as well as condiments, sauce, that may keep him free from disease, end quote. Let him thus promote the welfare of his people. Rate of taxes. Let the king, let the king take from tradespeople and artisans 1/50th part of their profits in silver and gold, and 1/6. It's either 50th or 15. No, 50th. Part of their profits in silver and gold, and 1/6, 1/8, or 1/12 of agricultural produce such as rice, end quote. If he takes it in cash instead of in kind, then to let him take it in such a way that the farmers and others would not suffer from poverty or from want of necessaries of life, such as food, drink, and so on, because when the people are rich, healthy, and have abundance of necessaries of life, the king flourishes. Let him therefore make his subject happy as he would his own children, and let the people regard the king, his ministers, and other officials as their natural protectors, since it is a fact that the farmers and other wealth producers are the real source of kingly power. The king is their guardian. If there were no subjects, whose king would he be? Or, on the other hand, if there were no king, whose subjects will they be called? Let both the rulers and the ruled be independent of each other in the performance of their respective duties, but let them subordinate themselves to each other in all those matters that require mutual harmony and cooperation. Let not the rulers go against the voice of the people, nor let the people and ministers do anything against the wish of the sovereign. The political duties of kings have thus been briefly described. Let those who want to study this subject in detail consult the four Vedas, the Manu Smriti, the Shakraniti, and the Mahabharata, and other books. The method of administering justice may be studied from the 8th and 9th chapters of Manu, but they are also described briefly below. The administration of justice. Quote, let the king, the court and the judges daily decide justly lawsuits which are classified under 18 heads according to the laws of the land and the teachings of the Dharma Shastra, if it be found necessary to undertake fresh legislation in respect of matters about which no laws are to be found in the law books of rishis, let such laws be framed as will promote the welfare of the rulers and the ruled. These are the following 18 causes of disputes. Deposit. The dispute arises when a man deposits an article with another and is refused its return on demand. Sale of one person of a thing that is owned from another. Association of some persons against a particular individual for a criminal purpose. Refusal to return a loan. non-payment or inadequate payment of one's wages, disputes with regard to sale or purchase, disputes between the owner of an animal and the man who looks after it, boundary disputes, assault, slander, larceny, burglary, and decoultery, violence, adultery, disregard of conjugal duties, disputes about inheritance, gambling with animate as well as inanimate things. These are the 18 causes of disputes among men. Let the judge observe the eternal law of justice and decide all these cases as of disputes among men justly, that is, without partiality. Where justice, having been wounded by injustice, approaches the court, and no one extracts the dart shot by injustice from the wound, all the judges who constitute the bench deserve also to be counted as wounded. Either a just and virtuous man should not enter an assembly or a court of justice, or, when he does enter it, should invariably speak the truth. He who looks on injustice perpetrated before his very eyes and still remains mute, or says what is false or unjust, is the greatest sinner. Where justice is destroyed by injustice and truth by untruth under the very nose of the judges who simply look on, all those who preside over that court are as if dead, but not one of them is alive. Justice being destroyed shall destroy the destroyer. Justice being protected shall protect the protector. Let no man therefore violate the laws of justice, lest justice being destroyed destroy him. He who violates the law of justice that gives power and prosperity and rains happiness like rain from heaven, is considered as lowest of the low by the wise. Let no one therefore violate the laws of justice. Justice alone in this world is the true friend that accompanies a man, even after death. All other companions become extinct. With the extinction of the body, justice never forsakes a man. When injustice is perpetrated in a court of justice, open parentheses, or an assembly, close parentheses, by partiality being shown to one party, the justice is divided into 4 parts. 1/4 falls to the share of the party in cause, 1/4 of his witnesses, 1/4 of all the judges. Open parentheses are members of the assembly, close parentheses, comma, and 1/4 of the presiding judge, open parentheses, or president of the assembly, close parentheses. Where he who deserves condemnation is condemned, he who is worthy of praise is praised, he who merits punishment is punished, and he who deserves honor is honored. In that court, the presiding judge and other judges, or the president of the members of the assembly, are guileless and innocent, and the evil deed recoils on him alone who committed it. End quote. Witnesses and the qualifications, etc. Quote, among all classes, those persons alone are eligible as witnesses who are men of character, learned, straightforward, who know their duty properly and are truthful and free from covetousness. Never should men of opposite character be considered as eligible to bear witness. Let women be witnesses for women, the twice-born for the twice-born, the Shudras for Shudras, and outcasts for outcasts. Let a judge never deem it extremely necessary to examine too strictly the competence of witnesses in case of violence, theft, adultery, the use of abusive language, and assault. All these things being done in the private, witnesses are not easily available in such cases. If there be contradictory evidence, let him accept as true the evidence of the majority. If the conflicting parties are equal in number, that of those distinguished by good qualities on a If there be contradictory evidence, let him accept as true the evidence of the majority if the conflicting parties are equal in number, that of those distinguished by good qualities. On a difference between equally distinguished witnesses, that of the best among the twice-born, sages, seers, and sannyasis, altruistic teachers of humanity. Two kinds of evidence is admissible: what has been seen and what has been heard by the witnesses. A witness who speaks the truth in a court of law neither deviates from righteousness nor deserves to be punished, but he who does otherwise should be properly punished. A witness who says anything in a court of law or in an assembly of good men, different from what he had seen or heard, should have his tongue cut off. He will consequently live in misery and pain for the rest of his life, and will have no happiness after death in consequence of having perjured himself. Let only that which a witness declares naturally be received as evidence, but what he says on being tortured by others be considered useless for the purposes of evidence by a judge. By what he says on being tutored by others be considered useless for the purposes of evidence by a judge. The witnesses being assembled in the court, let the judge or the consuls, in the presence of the plaintiffs and defendants, address them in the following way. Quote, O ye witnesses, whatever you know with regard to the matter before us in relation to both parties, declare truthfully, for your evidence is needed in this case. A witness speaks. A witness who speaks the truth shall hereafter in future rebirths attain to exalted regions and states and enjoy happiness. He will obtain glory in this life as well as the next, because the power of speech has been declared in the Vedas as the cause of honor and disgrace. He who invariably speaks the truth is worthy of honor, while he who falsifies his speech is disgraced by truthfulness. In speech is the cause of justice and righteousness advance. It behooves witnesses of all classes, therefore, to speak the truth and nothing but the truth fairly. The soul itself is its own witness. The soul itself is its own motive power. O man! Exclamation mark. Thou who art the chief witness on behalf of others, destroy not the purity of thine own soul. In other words, do not know what it is in thy soul, and to which thy speech corresponds as truth, and the reverse as untruth. The wise consider no man greater than one whose discerning soul feels no misgivings when he speaks. O man! Exclamation point. If thou desirest to obtain happiness by uttering a falsehood when thou art alone, thou art mistaken, for the supreme spirit that resideth in thy soul seeth whatever thou doest, good or bad. Fear him, O man! Exclamation point, and live constantly a truthful life. End quote. Quote, evidence given through covetousness, through love, through fear, through friendship, through lust, through hunger, through anger, through ignorance, and through childishness must be held false. Should a witness give false evidence from either of these motives, let fitting punishment be inflicted on him. If a man give false evidence through covetousness, he shall be fined 1,000 panas, or £1 10 if through love 4 shillings 3 pence, if through fear 8 shillings 4 pence, if through friendship 16 shillings 8 pence, if through lust £1 13 shillings 4 pence, if through anger £3 2 shillings 6 pence, if through ignorance 8 shillings, and if through childishness 2 shillings 1 pence. Punishment may be inflicted through property, the back, the tongue, hands, feet, eyes, ears, the nose, the P-word, and the whole body. The amount of various punishments, open parentheses, with regards to fines, close parentheses, that have been described above shall be done hereafter, should vary with the pecuniary circumstances of the offender, with the time and place and nature of the offense and with the general character and position, open parentheses, shoulder and the like, close parentheses, of the offender. The infliction of unjust punishment destroys reputation and honor, past, present, and future, in this world as well as the glory to come. It causes great misery and intense suffering even after death. Let a judge therefore avoid infliction of unjust punishment. A king who inflicts punishment on such as deserves it not, and inflicts no punishment on such as deserves it, brings infamy on himself in this life, and shall sink to great depths of misery in the next. Let the guilty therefore be invariably punished, and the innocent never punished. For the first offense let the offender be punished by gentle admonition, for the second by harsh reproof, for the third by a fine, and for the fourth by corporal chastisement, such as flogging and caning, or by imprisonment or death penalty. And quote with whatever limb a man commits an offense, even that limb shall the king remove or destroy, in order to set an example to others and prevent the repetition of the same crime. Whosoever, be he father, tutor, friend, wife, son, or spiritual teacher, deviates from the path of duty, becomes liable to punishment. In other words, when a judge sits on the seat of justice, let him show partiality to no one, and punish all justly. Where an ordinary man is fined 1 penny, a king shall be fined 1,000. Punishment inflicted on the king should be 1,000 times heavier than that on an ordinary man. The king's minister 800 times, the official lower than him 700, one lower still 600, and so on. Even the lowest official, such as the constable, should be punished not less than 8 times as heavy as an ordinary man would be. For if the government officials or servants be not punished more severely than ordinary people, they would tyrannize over them. As a lion requires a severer punishment than a goat to be well broken, similarly do the rulers, from the highest officials, the king, to the meanest servant of the state, require heavier punishment than ordinary people. If a person possesses the power of discrimination and yet commit theft, let his punishment be 8-fold, 8 times the amount of the theft. If he be a Shudra, 16-fold. If a Vaishya, 32-fold. If a Kshatriya, 64, or 100-fold, or even a 128-fold if he be a Brahmin. The more knowledge a man possesses, and the greater his reputation and influence, the heavier his punishment should be. Let not the king and other persons in authority who desire wealth and prosperity and love and justice and righteousness delay, even for a single moment, the punishment of a man who has committed atrocities, violence, such as dacoity, robbery, etc. A man who commits violence is more wicked and a more grievous offender than a slanderer, a thief, or even one who assaults another without provocation. The king who suffers a man that perpetrates such atrocities to go unpunished incurs public displeasure and shall soon perish. Neither through friendship nor even at the offer of immense wealth should a king let a criminal who commits violent acts go unpunished. On a criminal who is a terror to the people, let the king inflict just punishment, such as imprisonment or death. Let him put a man who is convicted of the murder of another, but not in self-defense, etc., to death without a moment's hesitation, be he his tutor, child, father, or some other elderly person, a Brahmin or a great scholar. He commits no sin, he passes the sentence of death on a criminal convicted of murder and such other highly heinous crimes, whether he be executed publicly or privately. It is like exposing anger to anger. Most Excellent is the king in whose realm there is neither a thief, nor an adulterer, nor a slanderer, nor a perpetrator of atrocious violence, such as a decot, nor a transgressor of the law. End quote. Quote, should a wife out of her family pride desert her husband and misconduct herself, let the king condemn her to be devoured by dogs before all men and women. Similarly, should a husband forsake his wife and misconduct himself with other women, let the king cause that sinner to be burnt alive publicly on a red hot iron bed. End quote. Capital O. Capital O, who shall punish the king or the king? Capital O, who shall punish the king or the queen, the Lord, chief, justice, or his wife, if any one of them commits such wicked crimes as adultery? Capital A, the assembly, open parentheses, or the court of justice, close parentheses. They should be punished even more severely than the people. Capital O, why will the king and other high personages suffer the assembly, open parentheses, or the court of justice, close parentheses, to punish them, question mark. Capital A, what is a man but a man endowed with virtue and favored by fortune? Were he to go unpunished, why would others obey the law, question mark. Besides, if the people and other persons in authority and the assembly would deem it just and necessary to punish the king, how can he single-handedly refuse to suffer punishment, question mark. Were the king and other high personages to go free, the king, ministers, and other men of influence and power would simply set justice and righteousness at naught, sink into the depths of injustice, and ruin the people as well as themselves. Remember, the teaching of the Vedic text that says, quote, verily the just alone is the true king. Yes, the just law is the true religion, quote, end quote. Whosoever violates it is lowest of the low. Capital O, how can it be right to inflict such severe punishments, since man has no power to make a limb or bring the dead back to life again, question mark. Capital A, whosoever calls it severe punishment is ignorant of the true principles of right government. The infliction of a heavy punishment on one man prevents others from committing similar crimes, and tends to keep them steadfast in righteousness. Truly speaking, this so-called heavy punishment is no heavier than the weight of a mustard seed when distributed among all the members of a community, while so-called light punishment, by its failure to check crime, is really 1,000 times heavier than the first, as it is multiplied 1,000 times by the proportional increase of crime. Now take for an illustration a community of 1,000 persons. If every one of them be punished, say, 1 pound each, the total punishment will be 1,000 pounds, while if one man in this community of 1,000 persons be punished, say, 100 pounds, and should that punishment succeed in preventing the repetition of similar crimes, the total punishment will not be more than 100 pounds, which is 10 times less than 1,000 pounds. Thus, the seemingly light punishment in the long run turns out to be the heavier one. Quote, let the king impose toll on all the ships and boats passing up and down sea canals, open parentheses or base close parentheses, and rivers big and small proportioned to the length of the country, that they traverse at sea. No settled duty can be imposed. Hence let him do what best suits the occasion. Let him, in such cases, make laws that may prove beneficial both to the state and the proprietors of the ships. End quote. Let him also protect his subjects You go to different foreign lands by the means of these ships, wherever they are. Let them never suffer in any way. Quote, let the king daily watch the results of various measures, open parentheses, adopted for the good of the state, close parentheses, inspect elephants, horses, and other conveyances, inquire into his income and expenditure, inspect his mines of precious gems and his treasury. A king who discharges all these duties most faithfully is free from all taint of sin and shall attain to the supreme state. End quote. Capital O is the ancient Aryan system of government, perfect or imperfect. Capital A, perfect, because all other systems of government, that prevail at present or shall prevail, have and will have for their basis the Aryan system of government. The laws that have not been declared expressively have been provided for by the text. Quote, let the parliament composed of scholars frame such laws as are just and beneficial to the rulers and the ruled. Quote, end quote. Let the king as well as his advisers bear in mind that early marriage must not, as far as possible, be allowed, nor the marriage of grown-up people without mutual consent. Let the king encourage the practice of brahmacharya. Let him put a stop to prostitution and the custom of plurality of wives, such as polygamy, etc., so that both body and soul may attain perfect strength and power. For if only mental powers and knowledge be developed, but not physical strength, one man of great physical strength may vanquish hundreds of scholars. On the other hand, if physical strength alone be sought after and not mental, the high duties of government can never be rightly discharged without proper training and requisite knowledge, and without proper discharge of these duties there can be no harmony. All will be discord and division, mental disputes, quarrels, and feuds that ultimately ruin all. Let, therefore, both mind and body be developed. There is nothing more prejudicial to the growth of physical and mental powers than prostitution and excessive sexual indulgence. Striyas should, in particular, be physically strong and possess well-developed bodies, because if they be lascivious, the government of the country is irrevocably ruined. The proverb, as the king, so shall the people be. The proverb, quote, as is the king, so shall the people be, end quote, should never be lost sight of. It, therefore behooves the king and other high personages never to misconduct themselves. Instead, let them always set a good example to others in the manner of just and righteous living. Thus have the duties of rulers been briefly described. Those who want to study them in detail refer to the Vedas. The 7th, 8th, and 9th chapters of Manu, the Shukraniti, the Vadraprajar, the Vidraprajagar, the Rajadharma, and Patmadharma, chapters of Shanktiparva and of Mahabharata. They should perfectly master the science and art of government, and rule one country or empire or the whole earth. Let all understand, quote, we are the subjects of the Lord of the universe, the King of kings. He is true king, and we are all his humble servants, end quote. May we in this world, through his mercy, be privileged to occupy kingly and other high offices, and may he make us the means of advancing his eternal justice. So that is the end of that chapter, and that provides a lot of clarity and, of course, a lot of understanding, a lot of peace and prosperity, and a lot of balance as well. it is also important to know that, as I mentioned before in previous broadcasts, being in tune and ultimately rising the entire consciousness, not only through basically the removal of poisons and toxins in the body, basically detoxification. Not only is that incredibly key to create healthy people, but ultimately, as I mentioned before, the point where human beings can be, ultimately will be, no longer needing the food, because the microfood that comes from the sun will be the main source of food. Solar rays will be a main source of food. Therefore, that promotes prosperity and wealth, of course, and most importantly, health. You have strong, mentally clear, and healthy individuals and subjects and everybody, etc. I'm going to read a little bit into this one. Actually, I'm pretty sure I read this before. So, like I said, actually have already read this. It's important to know, of course, a very healthy reminder to know the Vedas. God and the Veda. So, once again, lots of knowledge. Like, it's well known, ultimately well known, that there's tons of information, evidence about spacecraft, about secret space programs that are not really secret. That's Corey Goode does a very, very good job of explaining his experience, his knowledge, his evidence, and his explanations, and done interviews with David Wilcox, as well as, and this has already been reiterated, so now we can move and progress as an entire planet into an accelerated rate of growth, which is now from a type 14 to a type 15 civilization, able to sustain energy from a level of 10 to the 156 watts. That's a lot of energy. That amount of energy, of course, is allowing us to co-create, to communicate, to elevate, and to continue to be on this positive, present, past, and future course that's beneficial for all of creation, for the entire universe, as we are all pervaded, as I am all pervaded, as we are all pervaded, as through creation, sustenance, stability, and sustainability of the entire universe. As I mentioned before, advanced levels of healing, the best of the best and the best for all of the planet, and of course for the entire universe that we occupy. Best of the best food, which should only be for a little bit for the entire planet, because macro food from the sun is the best form of, one of the best forms of energy, and we're going to encourage that. There's also many different forms of sustenance, as is described by other civilizations in our galaxy. The water. Of course, protein water is the best form of water, light water, That is really what people should be drinking, and that's exactly the type of water that should be in the human body. And it should be on planet Earth as well. And planets, there are many freshwater planets. Planet Earth should also be a freshwater planet. Shelter, of course, there's many different forms of shelters, as I already reiterated before, such as that which we can resemble that of Agartha. We can also resemble Telosian living structures. We can also resemble our current architectural structures, creative designs, and also enhance amongst them due to the fact that we can build with an accelerated creational expandability, not only due to the fact that we are types 15 civilization, but also due to the fact of the advanced understanding of not only the materials which I've already reiterated before, but the type of alloys that we can make of super materials that can condense that onto one of super materials of the atoms and the elements of what can be made out of certain types of designs for a type of structure, which can be geometrical, as I already described before. The formation of course, which is actually taking a lot less time. There's actually a lot of biospheres that have already been made, and there's going to be a lot more made, and that's going to, of course, accelerate not only the desire for not only the effort of humanitarian effort, but the desire of humanitarian action, and that's going to be, of course, and it still is, one of the principal causes of healing and elevation and growth and advancement of our Type 15 civilization. And that co-creative force, ultimately, energy, and that practice is eventually going to lead us into a Type 16 civilization. This is your host, Christopher Michael Curtis Bowen, in another edition of Fire of Liberty. Late afternoon, moving on towards evening. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, how are you all?